Reito is guided through a technologically advanced room by a woman. The confused boy follows her around to an isolated room with a double-sided window. The girl then reveals the other side window full of unclothed, desperate women, all willing to mate with Reito. He was in harem paradise. Welcome to the future is 2048, and the world is technologically advanced beyond anything. Only people who want to work, go to work, otherwise they can just relax. AI has taken over the world in terms of employment. Reito is an ordinary boy who is pursuing a medical degree hoping to become a doctor. However, he himself is plagued by a disease that doesn't have a cure yet, but he can still survive using the technology of cold sleep, or as they call it, hibernation. On his final day, Reito decides to confess his feelings to his longtime crush, Arisa. He does seem to have some serious commitment issues and waited till the very last day. Arisa can't give her answer, how could she? It was so sudden, but Reito doesn't mind. He can't ask her to wait for him for 5 years anyway. Reito then heads to the doctor's office where he would be put to sleep, alongside his big brother Ryu and little sister Miharu, the only 2 living relatives that he has. As he is being ready for the procedure, Arisa arrives there as well, so she does like him back after all. That's a relief for a man going into Captain America mode for the next 5 years. He gives her his locket as safekeeping and once again heads to his future. The procedure then begins. Reito is placed into a container and the liquid pours into it. The voices of his close ones start muffling. And just as he passes out, he can faintly hear Arisa telling him that she would wait for him to wake up. Reito then opens his eyes after 5 years, and he is strangely surrounded by all female nurses who all seem weirdly shy and aroused by him. Next to him is a purple-haired lady who tells him that it's 2045. Reito had slept for his destined 5 years. His attendant, Mira, the purple-haired girl, then takes him to a doctor who's on standby to check his vitals. Reito asks the doctor if he can see his own personal doctor instead, but the woman tells her that his doctor is no longer alive. Everything seems to be weird, and Reito is getting more and more confused. Reito is then put in a limo where Mira explains to him about the MK virus, a virus so much deadlier than corona that it killed every single victim in just 3 days of infection. Even today, there was no cure. Half of the world population was gone. Mira opens one of the window shades and shows him how the once technologically advanced society had crumbled back into a mess. Reito thinks it's all some kind of a sick joke, a prank, and he rushes outside, jumping from the car to see for himself. What he sees shocks him. There was not a single man out there. Everyone was a woman, and the world was nothing like it was before. Society had fallen into chaos. Mira and her guards jump to surround Reito and protect him from the horde of women around him. One crazy woman sees Reito and jumps towards him. Thankfully, she is dealt with on spot. Mira explains that 4 years ago, the MK virus, or male killer virus, emerged and wiped out the male population except for him and 4 other immune men who were similarly frozen, and they are obligated to have children to save humanity from extinction. The story seemed like it was taken from a sci-fi novel, but it was true. Reito was in a harem whether he liked it or not. Reito, however, is adamant that he doesn't want to sleep around with hundreds of women just so that he can have children with them. At heart, he is still loyal to Arisa. So in order to convince Reito, Mira calls in his sister Miharu. Miharu, who is now a teenager, arrives and explains that their brother Ryu contracted the virus and had to be frozen to save his life. She also explains that Alyssa, who was actively involved in finding a cure for the MK virus, also had been missing for the last 3 years. Reito is distraught, and he even gives Arisa a call. Yeah, right, if it was that simple. Arisa was truly lost. That night, Reito realizes just how serious the women were when Mira arrives in his room and starts stripping before him, asking him for his seed. Reito stops her midway and sends her away, but things are going to get more and more serious from here on out. Reito comes up with a plan. The next day, when Mira takes him to see the catalog of women that he could choose and impregnate, Reito asks for 1 month's time for him to find Arisa. He tells her that if there was anyone he would end up hooking up with, it would be Arisa and no one else. Mira agrees, but says until Elisa is located, she will send a different girl to his room every night so that they can seduce him into impregnating them. It doesn't matter if he doesn't end up doing it, but she would keep sending the girls regardless. Elsewhere in the same facility is another man. They call him Number 1, but his name is Kyoji Hino. He's one of the other immune men to the MK virus and was the first one to be awakened from the cold sleep. Unlike Reito, Kyoji is enjoying his life in this new world. He is taking full advantage of his manhood and sleeping around with 10 women a day or even more, who knows. He even has the choice to sleep with literal actresses. This guy is living his dream. Reito, on the other hand, finishes his meal and heads back to his room, and that's when he meets with Kyoji. Reito is really uncomfortable with how frank and calm Kyoji is with everything happening, while Kyoji can't believe how stupid Reito is for not taking the opportunity he has in hand. The 2 men part uncomfortably, and Reito finally reaches his room and decides to take a shower to cool down and process everything. Unfortunately for him, the woman that Mira had promised she would send a cane arrives unclothed in the shower alongside Reito, and tries to seduce him as Mira promised. She does a pretty good job, but Rita ends up failing because of all the pressure. When he wakes up, Akane is there by the sofa drunk, and on his bed is another small woman. Girl, she looks really young. Her name is Sui. We see that Sui and Akane were going to be with him for the rest of the days. That night, he reluctantly sleeps platonically with Akane and Sui Yamada, as Mira changed her mind and assigned them to him instead of sending random girls every night. One of them was his bodyguard and the other was his nurse. We will see who is who. The next day, Reito, Mira, Akane, and Sui examine Elisa's old laboratory for clues as to where she might have disappeared. Reito manages to get her stuff to be taken to his room where he can examine them. As the group is wandering around the lab, a strange woman in the shadows manages to release a literal bear into the premises. The bear approaches the group to attack, and Reito quickly jumps to save Sui as the bear walks toward her. Turns out the little girl was actually his bodyguard, and she literally ends the bear's life with just one kick to its head. When Reito learns Elisa was working on a cure for the MK virus before she mysteriously disappeared, Reito decides to finish her work and appears on the news to relay his goal. Bold move, because since he is a rare commodity at this point, being a man, he would be in a lot of trouble because of this. Late that day, Reito finds a recorded message inside Elisa's old teddy bear. How convenient, where she reveals the MK virus is actually a man-made biological weapon. Despite knowing this mega secret, Reito decides to keep it to himself. He doesn't really know who he can trust. He, however, does confide to Mira that she resembles Elisa and apologizes for not producing babies, but she says working on a cure is indeed the better solution. Meanwhile, a council of women is having a meeting. They look really suspicious and seem to be the ones who have made this whole situation in the world. The council views Reito as a threat to their power and decides that it's time for another man to be revived. We are then taken back once again to 2040, the age where life was somewhat normal. Shota Doi is an introverted high schooler who pretty much gets bullied by everyone at his school because he has somewhat different tastes in music and life itself. The bullying the guy faces is relentless. Pretty much everywhere he goes, he gets tormented by his bullies. Especially Takamatsu and his girlfriend, Arisa, who just takes so much joy in torturing poor Shota. His only allies are his sister Mayu and his music teacher Yuzuki Hamu, the only two people he holds dear in his life. However, just like Reito, Shota also gets the disease sometime in 2040, and he too ends up in the same cold sleep. 5 years later, Shota awakens to this new world with no men and is attended by a lady named Karen. Karen tells him about the MK virus and its effects on the world, to which Shota reacts surprisingly well. However, Karen tells him that despite everything, he is up to resume his schooling in his old school. Shota is taken aback at first, but then remembers that the virus probably killed his bullies already and decides to go to school. Shota, despite the time spent away in cold sleep, hasn't changed a bit and is still the introvert that he was before. Minus the bullying and literally every other boy, life is pretty much the same for him. One thing that makes life a bit better is that his teacher Yuzuki is still alive, and she seems a bit too happy for him. So much happy that night, she comes to his room and offers herself to him. Shota doesn't even flinch, and the two end up sleeping together. For the next few days, Shota continues at school trying to get along with the other girls, but his heart is set on his teacher. That day, when Shota visits the nurse's office, he yet again meets with Yuzuki, and yeah, they end up doing it in school. Elsewhere, Karen reports to her superiors about the situation and how number 3, aka Shota, was doing a decent job. The superiors asks her why they had to open up the school, and Karen reveals that everyone in the school came there before Reito's press conference, so they still think that Shota is the only male alive, giving him more opportunities. Weirdly so, this was all a race between the women to see whose man got the most girls pregnant. A few days have now passed and Shota has settled down pretty well into this whole new world. He has been sleeping with Yuzuki pretty much every day. However, life with infinite possibilities when constricted to just one gets a bit boring. 1 week later, Karen drags Shota to the swimming class. He is reluctant at first because he has always been admired, but he has no bullying to worry about now, so he eventually agrees. That night, on little notice, Natsu Ichijo, one of his classmates belonging to a really rich family, is assigned to be his temporary roommate. Karen tells him because of a faulty AC, but we all know this is just another ploy to seduce Shota. Natsu seems a bit too rich. She doesn't even know how to change her own clothes and asks Shota to help her out. The poor guy only has feelings for his teacher, but still ends up helping the girl. All day after that, though, he is troubled by super horny thoughts. He hadn't been seeing Yuzuki for a few days because she was on her period, and this new girl was throwing herself at him every day. Shota's troubles keep growing, so he calls the teacher to ask her if she felt bad that other girls were coming for him too. Yuzuki tells him not to worry as he belonged to everyone and she didn't feel bad about it. This was all Shota wanted to hear. That night, Natsu comes into Shota's bed explaining how she couldn't sleep alone and confesses that her father gave her an arranged marriage to a much older man until they were both killed by the MK virus. One thing leads to another, and well, the two end up sleeping together. When Yuzuki finally returns, Shota confesses that he slept with Ichijo and begs for forgiveness, but she says they all know he belongs to everyone. This feels oddly strange to Shota. In fact, everything does feel that way. Almost everyone is always trying to please him and nothing bad ever happens to him. Something was definitely wrong. He confronts Karen and demands answers. Was this whole thing just a big experiment? Was he just a lab rat? Karen is amused that Shota was smart enough to figure it out in just a few days. She takes him before the class and says she reopened his old school to make him comfortable so he would mate and repopulate the planet. Just to prove the fact that all the girls there were for him, she asks every one of them to strip and the girls just do it. Elsewhere, the shady council of women from Japan decides that since number 2, aka Shota, isn't mating with anyone, Mira wasn't doing her job well, and they decide to remove her from the position of his attendant. With less than a month remaining for Reito to make the cure before he must mate, the situation inside the place is getting more and more intense by the minute. He is busy with the research but hasn't made any progress at all when it comes to cracking the virus. Frustrated, he heads outside of the office and bumps into Maria Kuroda, who is running around with nothing but her lab coat on. The two of them fall on each other in a really awkward manner, which is seen by Rie Katagiri, Raito's new attendant. Katagiri, unlike every other woman in the End Harem, seems really hostile towards Reito. She looks like she just hates men. In order to research further into the virus, Reito and the group decide to go to Kaiman City, the first place in Japan where the virus emerged. There he has planned to interview an old woman named Taniguchi, the widow of the virus' first victim. On the train ride to the city, Reito realizes that Maria, who is pretty shy when it comes to talking to him, is actually really confident when it comes to discussing viruses. She was a virologist and Reito finds her to be pretty trustworthy, just like Akane, Sui, and Mira. Katagiri, however, was not so easy to trust. At first, Taniguchi is not very open and doesn't seem to want to reveal much. She definitely knows something but isn't really sure if she could trust the other people in the room. She doesn't cooperate at all and just ends up berating them. When they leave, it is revealed that Taniguchi is in contact with Arisa and wonders why Arisa will not reveal herself. Oddly so, she finds Reito and Arisa similar to each other. Back in their hotel, Reito is taking a bath and is forced to hide in a sauna when other women appear. Apparently, the concept of a male sauna had already disappeared. In the sauna, though, he meets up with an American named Chloe who claims to be a transfer student. The girl seduces Reito and tricks him into kissing her, just as the others walk in, injuring them. Later, Mira talks with Taniguchi about how honorable Reito is. She tells her how Reito is selfish and doesn't mate just because he is true to his love and wants to save the other men in the world. This convinces Taniguchi to share what she knows. However, someone sneaks in and poisons her IV tube, leaving her in critical condition. Before losing consciousness, however, Taniguchi asks that a photo of her and her husband be given to Reito. After getting nothing of value from Taniguchi, the group decide to visit the abandoned hospital in the area, where the very first patients of MK virus were treated. However, there's nothing of importance in the hospital and it clears shouts, "Someone remove evidence here." On the other hand, Kyoji is having a similar issue like Shota from the last episode. He has had all the women thrown at him and has enjoyed them as much as he can, but doing the same thing every day has made him bored. So he heads out with his attendant to pick up one of the girls from the street at random. And the one that he picks at random is Mahiru. What are the odds of that? Without much progress, Reito's group decides to return back. On the day of their return, Reito notices that his scanner was reacting to the photo given by Taniguchi and scans the photo to find incomplete blueprints of the MK virus design. Someone had definitely made the virus, and though incomplete, using this blueprint, Reito could try to reverse engineer the virus. As soon as the group return, Kyoji's attendant Neneko informs Reito and Mahiru about Kyoji's request. The siblings are highly against the idea, and Reito goes to meet with Kyoji and let him know that his intentions would not bear fruit. Reito protests that his sister is only 16, but Kyoji begs, telling Reito he is in love with Mahiru. Unable to convince him otherwise, Reito agrees to arrange a lunch date with Reito attending. This, as expected, doesn't really go well. Mahiru has no interest in Kyoji. Later that day, when Reito is having his bath, Akane and Maria enter the bath with him, realizing that he has been acting weird lately. They tell him that they are on his side and also reveal the fact that many virologists were getting lost or had been assassinated in the last few years. It was almost as if the government was taking them out to stop looking for a cure for the virus. The two girls had entered the bath so that no one would record them while talking. Nice move, but very demonetizable.
Yeah, boy.
The next day, Reito, Marie, and Akane, along with Sui, managed to establish a base in the refugee area of the city. Marie manages to create a network of computers off the grid from the government's inspections so that they can investigate the MK virus further. The very first thing that they find is that most of the virologists were found admitted to the same abandoned hospital from Kaiman City. What a stroke of luck. Back in the experimental school, Shoto is now common property. The girls have now started to draw lots to become his new roommate. The winner of the lots this time is Rika Yanichi. However, Shoto is just not comfortable with frank girls like her yet and doesn't respond well to her advances. In fact, he doesn't even respond at all. He just runs away to the teacher's lounge, his secret hiding location from bullies. Shunka Haraji, another girl from the school, happens to come there as well. Turns out she too was bullied when she was in middle school, and the two find that they are similar to each other. It seems a lot far-fetched, but Shunka uses this one common thing to seduce Shoto, and it works. They end up sleeping together in the lounge itself. Shoto, however, still feels a bit used after all this. The girls were fighting for him, which he didn't expect, but also the fact that he was turning into a literal baby-making machine was very unsettling to him. He calls Yuzuki to get some advice, but she doesn't pick up his calls. Having everything with him, Shoto was still alone. The next day, the seductions continue. Akira, the one who showed him with the volleyball, locks him up in a locker room and seduces him while apologizing. Very illegal. Shoto was slowly losing himself in all of this chaos. The following class, Karen makes a new arrangement where a girl will be assigned as his servant daily. Their payment? A kiss from Shoto. As promised, after kissing Rika, he trips and scrapes his hand and is taken to the school nurse. Even after getting the required medicine from the nurse, Karen still orders Ichijo, Shunka, and Akira to sleep with him at the same time. Shoto had now finally fallen into the rabbit hole of pleasure and he starts losing himself. Over the next few days, he becomes much more sexually aggressive with the girls. One day, Shion Hoshino, one of the girls who regularly ignored him when he was bullied and even enjoyed the whole bullying show while she was at it, transfers into the school. She seems to be eager to mate with Shoto, but the guy ignores her like she ignored him in his time of need. Shoto is pretty pissed that she entered his heaven, but Karen explains Shion tried to become an actress, but due to the MK virus, she can only get a role if she mates with Shoto. She was to torment or do anything with. She was at his mercy. Still angry about her ignoring him, he humiliates her by forcing her to come to class in her underwear before he mates with her in public. He makes a few of his side chicks watch as he mates with her on the rooftop with the uncomfortable position possible. While this was pretty brutal for an introvert like Shoto, it gives him another evil idea. Shoto asks Karen to find someone and bring her to him. Karen delivers Arisa in chains where a vindictive Shoto forces her to lick him in the wounds that he had suffered because of her and her boyfriend. Shoto was going full evil Ersing mode. There is no coming back from that. Every day a new girl is now part of Shoto's schedule. If he doesn't like the girls already there, new ones are brought in for him. At this point, it was almost like Shoto himself was going to complete the world repopulating job. However, one of the girls among the newly transferred ones is pretty sus. To begin with, she refuses Shoto's advances. Nobody does that, and at night, the girl appears to be in contact with Arisa. They are planning to abduct Shoto. On the hand, Reito and his gang decide to head back into the abandoned hospital to get more clue about Arisa and the MK virus. Reito's group explores the abandoned hospital where Sui accidentally breaks a wall to reveal an air duct. They crawl through it and fall into an underground laboratory, the place where the virus was probably created. However, before they can investigate it, they come across a group of women who strangely are intent on killing them. Fortunately for them, the women are killed in turn by the mercenaries led by Clovo, aka Ms. Mansfield, who turns out to be one of the United Women, UW's peacekeeping agents. As Chloe saves the group from the exploding hospital, which was apparently set with a time bomb, her assistant, Miss Pope, yes, that's her name, meets the Japanese UW Council and arrests them after deducing the MK virus was created under their orders. While the explosion at the hospital is settling, several other explosions occur at the locations where the men are kept. The weird girl in school also tries to abduct Shoto, but fails. However, Arisa and her so-called terrorist organization manages to capture one of the men. Number 4. Shoto, who was injured in the explosion, wakes up in the hospital where Karen explains terrorists tried and failed to kidnap him. Shoto seems to have grown tired of his daily routine and asks her why she does not sleep with him. Karen tells him that she will if he wants to, but she needs his help to rule the world. What a casual thing to ask for. Shoto agrees to help her. Chloe's group takes over Japan and orders Kyoji to stop mating until the terrorists are dealt with. This certainly angers the man, but serious, what can one man do against a billion women? Elisa and the terrorist organization hack the airwaves of the worldwide television channel, and they reveal her group is called Izanami, who are not terrorists but a group of rebels against the UW. They claim all the world leaders created the virus to wipe out men and create a world of only women, and that Izanami aims to save the men. The UV leaders were working on creating humans without men, so as soon as that happens, the men will all be killed, which is why the UV needed to be stopped. They demand all the men in stasis and those who are awake to be turned over to them. After the telecast, Reito's group decides Chloe cannot be trusted and that they must escape. They rush to Reito's room to gather some stuff, but the room is already occupied by Shoto, who seems to have undergone a plastic surgery, and Karen, who is turning out to be an actual Karen, just can't stand her ab. In a flashback, it is revealed that Karen performed a procedure on Shota to make him slightly older and no longer need glasses. Or in other words, Shota got the Kardashian makeover. Meanwhile, Reito meets Mira and urges her to escape with them, but she will only agree if he mates with her, which he refuses. Suddenly, Ms. Pope arrests them. It was their plan to take Reito to Japan in the first place, saying they will be taken to America, but Ri and Maria knock her out and they escape to Mahiru's refugee friends. Back at the Yugili headquarters, Shota and Karen make a deal with Chloe to allow Shota to keep mating and make Karen the ruler of Japan. Reito's group then gets on a ship owned by Izanami that is headed to Taiwan, but Ri and Mira stay behind and are arrested. The ship lands where Reito finally reunites with Ariza. If you enjoy the series, don't forget to leave a comment and a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.